Hello everyone, this is Tyler coming to you from Socrates Investment. Today I am going to discuss a pretty big topic that hit a lot of the news on Monday, and that was that Genworth Financial was actually officially um, they were permitted to be acquired by a big Chinese company. Um, Immediately following this disclosure, the stock soared about 26% for the trading day, and um, this wasn't like the official acquisition. This was um, what had happened is that this Chinese real estate and finance company known as China Oceanwide Holdings Group, they had made a bid for about $2.7 billion to acquire this company in 2016, and just to show people how long these corporate bids can take. Right now it's 2018. It's June, so this had stretched on for almost 2 years, and it actually had to go through this regulatory body known as CFIUS, basically a U.S. government regulatory body that gives the green light if foreign companies can come and take over these large U.S. companies, and they indeed did give the green light finally. There was a lot of up in the air uncertainty and stuff, and many people had even thought that this thing wouldn't be approved of, especially with the recent change in presidency here in the United States, and a lot of change in other government people. And also, more importantly, is that sanctions on China were also greatly adjusted by our President Trump. So it was very relieving to see. And so I want to go back, or I want to now speak on a more personal note. So I had purchased this stock about say 2 years ago, and the stock at the time was trading at maybe 4.5 ish share or so. Actually, it was probably less. It was probably closer to three. Um, but what had happened is that I had made the stock purchase, and this was actually one of my larger earlier investments, and I was not very familiar with these acquisitions and whatnot. And then after a while, once this bid had been rejected and rejected again, I was almost thinking that they would be just this thing wouldn't go through, and then I actually ended up selling a good shares number of shares of this stock, and that was a very foolish error on my behalf. But I was just under the notion that okay, this probably won't happen. I waited for like a year, and it wasn't so much that I mean this wasn't the type of stock or company that would tank. I mean but this sector, they're an insurance based company. They wouldn't need to be under this the umbrella of this Chinese company, but it was to their advantage to be. And so I sold it, or I sold probably half my stake, and then um, shortly, maybe 2 or 3 months after, there was more positive feedback coming through, and then finally, I actually repurchased a good amount of shares again, and then I held on to those for it's probably been like a year or a little over a year, and that was a wise move on my behalf because I um, I made it larger in terms of the capital gain from it. I mean, I made a larger profit from the initial purchase in stock I made like 2 or 2.5 years ago on Genworth. But even with the transaction I made like a year and a half ago, it was still very substantial. So my whole point in this video is just to remind everyone that investment first and foremost is not emotion, and often emotion is just like a huge overrider of and such like inhibitor of making these logical and very wise transactions. Now, I would also like to credit my dad, who had he had strongly urged me to purchase this stock from the get go. So, without him, I don't think I would have even been aware of the potential of this stock like 2.5 years ago. Genworth just wasn't on my radar, and I don't think it was even on a lot of smaller investor radars at that time. And that's why it's very important. This is another lesson: is surround yourself with people that are not just like-minded, but um, surround yourself with people that have different opinions, that have more experience, that are more knowledgeable traders, because you really want like kind of a different like feedback and opinions. Like I mean I can't tell you like in this very much ties into other sectors, into the business world, into like schooling. I mean, you always want to try to expand your sphere of influencers. I mean, you're going to be a sphere of influence to those people, but they're also going to be like there for you. So, fortunately, through his feedback and just through a very level mind, just I mean, that's the main thing, is not letting emotions override you, and just being very grounded and knowing you had the right strategy. Now, this is another example I like to use. Think of like a distance runner in a long distance. Like I used to run distance, and in like a 5,000 meter in the U.S. that would be like 3 miles. The guy often, like when these guys run those races, they have to like totally like time their like laps pretty even, so that they end up like finishing with enough energy. And especially at a professional level, they finish these races with just an amazing amount burst of energy. So think of like a 3,000 5,000 meter, and like the guy like there's actually a really famous Norwegian just like a few weeks ago. He was running a 1,500 shorter race, but same concept. And he ran this race from the beginning. He was way towards the back, and but he knew his lap time. He knew I mean, he had a plan in mind. He had all the this determined. But his two brothers are professional runners, and his dad also coaches him, and that he knew that how fast he had to cover this distance. And he maintained the speed even though he was towards the back heading into the fourth lap. And then at that point, he just started moving up, like at the like 1,200, 1,300, 1,400. And by the last 100-meter stretch, he was actually fighting neck and neck for third place with the reigning world champion for track. So, and this is the same thing. Like, so he maintained his or he stayed true to his plan, and he was consistent and just knew what he had to do. He didn't follow like emotion, or he didn't let emotions override him. It was just objective, very scientifically approached, and the same thing applies to investment. It's about being objective. It's about taking a scientific and objective approach. So hopefully that kind of helps people to kind of relate to to how they can apply this strategy for stocks in the future. And this is this Genworth was not a biopharmaceutical, which is the stocks I usually stick to, but it's an excellent industry to be in, and they should be successful in the future. So hopefully there are some lessons that you were able to learn from this video. and I encourage you to please subscribe to my channel. Thanks.